An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
During our Dharma talks the rest of the week, if you are a person experiencing any difficulties or challenges with hearing, this can be a time to scooch closer. It's appropriate to come over and even fill this space with chairs if you need to pick up and physically move yourself to come closer. But folks can tighten up the circle.
You can just move your chair in a small arc on each side of the altar, here. Please feel free to.
Make it even more intimate.
We can just do a video check to see. We're going to use the main screen. Flint and I will be teaching together. So we'll just do a video check. So as you move in, we'll just make sure.
And come on close. I mean, you can
Actually, let's all together.
All the way up to the altar.
Whether you can hear fine or not, let's all just tighten up our circle.
On either side of the altar, fine. You have to put yourself back later, but that's okay.
Yeah. Dharma scooching.
Even do you mind spinning just a little bit that way? Just a little video. That's good.
The window there.
Yes.
And Katya and others online, you can see us.
I'm going to say this just because we're moving around right now. You're a kid here. You want to do your own thing. You're just follow the line. Like you didn't pass it. Yeah. Do what you need. Okay. Thank you. Go fast.
So if you'd like to stay with us during the first part, like you did today, you can. Or you can just do whatever you want.
I'm going to start with something that you have, which is another one of your handouts that's on the right-hand side. It says John Terra on Koan. And then there's another handout that we're going to get to, which is Ordinary Mind is the Way, which is on the left-hand side. We can do that just a little bit. Yeah. We're going to start with the handout that says John Terra on Koan. It was on the right-hand side of the packet. And then we're going to follow it in just a few minutes with the one that was on the left-hand side. That's a Koan, Ordinary Mind is the Way, page 19. So just so you know, we're doing all our paper shuffling as best we can right now. For those of you online. But first, any questions left over from the morning? Something that just was really left out there that you wanted to make sure you checked it out. May not be, but I wanted to.
Yeah, okay.
There's one just insightful comment I have.
Okay.
About the don't confront it as darkness line. It's really interesting because we have a aspiration for like illumination and enlightenment, but then there's this very clear piece around not perceiving the darkness as problematic, and not even perceiving it as darkness, actually. It's all relative. So that's just like, wow, I needed to hear it.
Don't get lost in distinctions.
Yeah.
I mean, dualities, really.
Yeah.
There's also another reference in one of our other chants These are the Sangakai, maybe I can't remember, but we have branching streams flow in the dark. In some of the Zen old pieces, the dark refers to the absolute. Because in the absolute, in the dark, you can't see any distinctions. Everything is one thing. And the light is the relative. You can see all the distinctions. So it's very different because sometimes we think of the light as like what you're looking for in the dark, like you're lost.
Right.
But it's, so I don't know on the hymn, the perfection of wisdom, if that's what's being spoken of, but it's another interesting
Yeah, then it's easy to be non-confrontational. There's no
intuitive.
problem.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. What you have in this one-page handout is a portion of an article that John Turner wrote, and you can see it was published in Shambhala Sun in 2007. And what I did is I just pulled out a little bit of the narrative about koans, because I think it's the best thing I've ever read about what koans are about. There are ways in which koans are used quite systematically and vigorously in the Rinzai tradition, in which there is quite a kind of a challenging way in which they're presented and you respond to the teacher and you either sort of pass or not. It's I've done some of that work. It's very easy, of course, to get caught in achievement because you got to pass. It's a pass-fail system, but it can be powerful. In the Soto tradition, we use them a little bit differently, and there's something at the end which talks about this, but I just wanted you can just read through it real briefly, and I'm going to make some comments because I think it's useful for us to walk through it together. It's very, very beautifully written and concise and keeps amplifying what we've been talking about so far. And then we're actually going to jump into a koan, so you get an example of what it's actually like once we've continued to deepen our sort of orientation towards koan. So let's begin at the beginning. He says, at the heart of Zen and all of Buddhism, I would say at the heart of all religious teachings and practices, there's always a story. And he says further, even in the simplest life, pain and disappointment accumulate. And at some moment, everyone longs to walk through a gate and leave the past behind, perhaps for an earlier time when the colors were bright and the heart carried no weight. The quest for a fresh start is so fundamental that it defines the shape of the stories we tell. It's been beautifully written, isn't it? It's like this is part of that longing, that comes up. And we have this longing that takes many kinds of shapes and accords with many kinds of stories, but usually it's in some way where things turn out a little better than they turned out. And in this case, he says sometimes we want to walk back to a time when maybe things were more simple, or before we carried quite so many burdens or had so much experience. Earlier time when the colors were bright and the heart carried no weight, which is curious because our practice allows us to unburden our heart and illuminate joy, ease, find it again. And this quest for a fresh start is so fundamental, it defines the shape of the stories we tell. And then I highlighted the next line, Buddhist story is what's happening to you now. Really? That's one to sit with. That's a koan all by itself. Buddhist story is what's happening to you now. The journey of the Buddha isn't a literal journey that happened long ago. And it's not what your life will become. It's here now. Paying attention helps you notice that. If you look into the life you have, your looking will lead you into a new life. What you meet on the way is part of the way. You feel that? This whole idea. This is what the story is talking about. This, what you're living right now. And yeah, there's a journey of an old guy in northern India, and there are journeys that many women and men have taken since then who walk this path. But it's not just saying, and then someday. It's what you're actually living right now, and paying attention helps you realize that. And that's why we said. And then the promise, if you look into the life you have, you're looking will lead you into a new life. That's a nice invitation, isn't it? It will lead you to a lot of places, some of which are places that you hope to go, and some of which you don't. It will be new, and it will make a difference. So these stories, which are called koans, by the way, those of you who are quite familiar with this, I know some of you, but the word koan literally means the public case. Like in, even like in legal matters, it's like writing out the draft of what the thing is. You know, it's a public case. It's just a story of what it is. And then, so he says here, koans are little stories from the point of view, if you spell that word right, from the point of view of awakening. A life in which you're unfaithful to your sorrows. Isn't that a great phrase? A life in which you're unfaithful to your sorrows. You're not quite so committed to your erotic adaptations. And for good reason, for a very good reason, we've developed, you know, to handle certain things. But it's like, this is my suffering and I'm sticking to it. You know? Very faithful to your sorrows. And we just think it's gotta work, right? Even though we have a lot of information and time. And then he says the classic Zen accounts from East Asia all have the same plot. The student doubts the value and purpose of life, connects with the master, so this might be for a very short time, even as little as a night or a dream or just reading the Koan, and usually works hard in meditation. Then she achieves, often in unlikely circumstances, or through some ridiculous error in practice, a breakthrough, followed by a lasting joy and compassion for others. So that's sort of like the Hollywood sketchbook. Life. But remember, they're little stories, not about awakening, they're from the point of view of awakening. It makes them so strange. Because that view is very different than the one that we merely have. And it's a view in which you're not bound by habits. Then he writes quite a bit that I didn't include in here. I put in parentheses about several stories of transformation under all types of various circumstances, including some biblical ones. Matter of fact, includes even Paul. He says, I like these stories because they indicate there are no conditions under which it is wise to refuse life. That's why I made it in bold. Man, there are no circumstances under which it is wise to refuse life. He doesn't say there are no circumstances under which you should, make some changes, wake up, respond appropriately. But those all happen with wisdom. Those only happen from a point of compassion if you don't refuse what's actually happening. You have to meet it. So that doesn't mean you accept it, like that's okay, that's not the point. But you have to meet it in order to know how to respond to it. You understanding this? It's very important. One of the things that you might do is be very adamant that you do not want something to happen that is quite damaging. You need to be really clear about that. But the only way you can do that is to accept that of what's happening. it's damaging. But see what I mean? It's not that not being responsive, but you're responding to what happens, not your reactions to what's happening.
Well, and it doesn't even mean that you're alive in an embodied way, you know? Because like if you go over scenarios in your mind around what, like just do a experiment, thought experimentation, then it's like, okay, well I can think of the Vietnamese monk who set himself on fire, you know? Was he refusing life? Not necessarily. You know what I mean? It's not even literal.
And then you have to ask yourself, am I willing to view some of these things that are taught so I can make some wise and compassionate decisions about my life? And he says further, from the Koan point of view, this is one of the consequences of awakening. Life is always here and it's always for our benefit. Another one to sit with. It's always here and it's always for our benefit. He doesn't say it's always here and it always meets our preferences. It's always here and it always gives you what you want. It says that life is what you're in, like it or not, and it's pouring itself out to you in all of its fullness. That's what you're getting. You're getting life. And then he does make one of the references I mentioned. And here he's talking about belief, like the joke I made earlier. He says changing what you believe is probably irrelevant in terms of awakening. But it's not about changing belief. Awakening undermines the stories you live by, as well as the way you make up stories, or what you can call a story. That's a great sentence, isn't it? You know, it's not just that you don't have the same old stories. The way that you make up the stories changes, or even what you call a story changes. Everything begins to fall apart in its ordinary life. And then he makes the point of switching thoughts. It's like switching rooms to what is essentially a prison of the mind at night. This is a variation of the old, deck chair thing. You can move things around and move rooms, but you're in the same prison. In fact, changing your beliefs about what's bad and what's good could even be an indicator that a more fundamental change has not taken place, especially if they're around good or bad, because you know that you're still locked in duality. Other side of the page. Then people talk about emptiness, because when you awake, the maps that hold your beliefs are suddenly gone. Nothing. You can change that to what we chanted in the Heart Sutra today. Zen people talk about boundlessness. They didn't use boundlessness. Because when you awaken, the maps that hold your beliefs are suddenly gone. You also notice that new maps appear in the mind even without encouragement from you. Wow, they're very persistent. And as new maps appear, you can take them as provisional. One person said one time, the mind of awakening is, one of those fancy words, aperspectival, meaning the mind of awakening isn't a new perspective that's in opposition to your old perspective. The mind of awakening doesn't take any one perspective. It's free to move in any perspective and not get caught there. Boundless. They can take any of those perspectives. It doesn't believe them or land on them. And this is hard for our dualistic mind to capture. The Zen task is to open to the gates of the world beyond our prejudice. Another great poetic line, one after another. Like the Buddha, you can step away from everything you're certain about. I think this possibility is the best contribution we can make, healing the flaws of consciousness and helping the world. And my favorite line of all that I've said many times and memorized, kindness without certainty. When you throw out certainty, we have the bare reality of consciousness. And another name for that is love. I was teaching somewhere recently, and I use this all the time. They said, unkindness comes out of certainty. What do you mean? I said, watch Fox News. I mean, that's a terrible political thing, but unkindness comes out of certainty. I know, you don't. This is what's true. That's not. Unkindness comes out of certainty. I was giving a talk at Molokai, and I was showing some images from Kalapapa, from the Kalapapa Peninsula, where the people who had Hansen's disease, leprosy, were isolated. And I said the government of Hawaii was very certain that that was the right thing to do. But it was horrible. So unkindness comes out of certainty. When we throw out certainty, when we open our mind beyond our prejudice, we have the bare reality of consciousness. We have that space. And without the contents we're talking about. And another name for that great space is love. What the mind, the bigger mind. So this is, I think, a really beautiful description of what Koans are about. The shades. Does it resonate with you at all? Or is it just me? It's lovely, isn't it? And then he makes another point here. He says, I was asked to write about Zen and have written about the path of transformation. It's fair to mention that there's another flavor of Zen in which people don't seek transformation. And that position is ours. Their position is a subtle one, and it goes like this. If you have the nature of awakening intrinsically, then anything you might do to change yourself is unnecessary. If you set off to get awakening, well, you're making trouble for yourself. They have a point. The paradox in the trying to transform your consciousness is that the effort to change prevents the change. It's like thinking about falling when you're on a tightrope. It's just going to confuse matters. So that school, which is called Soto, doesn't only use the koans and favors simply sitting meditation, zazen, and ceremonies performed as the embodiment of the perfection that already exists. There's a nice description of it right there. The approach has its own virtues, and Shunryu Suzuki, probably the greatest of the modern masters in American culture. The two schools, the Koan school and the non-Koan one, get mixed up, of course, because awakening can strike you when you're not looking for it. So all of this, I think, is just such a nice summary. I didn't want to try to say it some other way. He said it really nicely. Mm-hmm. And it's not so much that it's important for us to, in some academic way, learn about these ancient stories, but it is important for us to, I think, well, in the social tradition, we take the same stories that the Rinzai folks use in Koan study, but we just sit with them and open them up and use them differently. The etymology of the word explain, explain, if you look at the etymology, explain, it means to put things down and lay them out flat, literally. Oh, we're going to lay them out and explain it. And I remember hearing James Hillman, the great Jungian analyst, say one time, and I thought it was very apropos to Koan. He said, maybe we've tried to explain things too much. Instead, we should get the ideas up and dance with them, not lay them out flat. And I think that what koans are they're the music or the libretto, of emptiness dancing, boundlessness playing. So that's what we're going to do. Any questions about this? Yeah. Something you can go back to and check out. And hopefully it's inspiring. I didn't know yet.
I have a correction or an addition.
Good.
Sago and Rinsai are Japanese schools of Zen.
Right.
In the
Left out the
Korean
Korean.
school, and in the Korean schools of Zen, they also use koans. And now they're used in a wide variety of ways, some less sort of rigid than they used to be.
Good. And you've studied with some of these folks?
Yes.
Yes, for quite a while. Thank you for having that. Sorry that I stayed with the Japanese quickly. It's curious because most of the old stories that are in the classic collections are actually from China. You know, they're from Japan or Korea. And I have, when we first started putting this together, I thought it would be very interesting for the folks who are going to be taking Juhai to each reflect on a koan and offer a little bit about their experience of living with it. And then I got more particular, and I thought, I'm going to assign them one. And also scaffold them in a certain way. And what I thought might be a nice teaching arc, and hopefully that will be the case. So anyway, Ryan, with the ordinary mind is way Koan, which is very, very foundational. In fact, Joko Beck, who you know is one of our ancestors, her school was called Ordinary Mind School. Directly from that. What do you have to say for yourself?
Go. Well, we'll see what I have time for. I have a couple poem options and a story option that I can sort of
I have a question.
bring forward. Yes.
Is that okay? What if we just read it first? So they know, because one of the things about this one is it's in the classic shape that they often take. And so if we just go through it, whether doesn't matter if you understand it or not, but it'll give us a feel for what they're like, and then you can take off the that.
Okay.
And okay, so do you want to read it, or others to read it? How would you like to do it?
What if I read Joshu and you read nonsense?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're the one asking the question.
Should do it as Joshu, or just read the first line and then you read the second?
Let's go ahead and just read it first.
Yeah.
Just so you hear it like it's written.
Joshu earnestly asked Nansen, "What is the way?"
And Nansen answered, "The ordinary mind is the way."
Joshu asked, "Should I direct myself toward it or not?"
Nansen said, "If you try to turn toward it, you go against it."
Joshu asked, "If I do not turn toward it, how can I know it is the way?"
Nansen answered, "The way does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing is delusion. Not knowing is a blank consciousness. When you have really reached the true way beyond all doubt, you'll find it as vast and boundless as the great empty firmament. How can it be talked about on a level of right and wrong?"
At these words, Joshu was enlightened.
Just like that.
Easy peasy.
Well, it only lasted like a second. So,
Yeah, we'll go back.
Read the next.
Let's have, what about if, I'm going to use. You're going to read it first.
Nansen was asked a question by Joshu, and Nansen's base was shattered and melted away. He could not justify himself. Even though Joshu has come to realization, He'll have to delve into it for another 30 years before he can realize it fully.
So there's things in there you might want to ask about. It's kind of curious. And then Muman, who collected these things, his verse.
The spring flowers, the moon in autumn, the cool breezes of summer, the winter's snow. If idle concerns do not cloud the mind, this is man's happiest season.
Or woman's.
This is man's happiest season.
Yeah. And then the last bit, which is a little excerpt from the talk that Muman wrote about this. Chris.
Ordinary mind, what is it? It's nothing but our ordinary consciousness, our everyday life. It's getting up, washing your face, eating breakfast, going to work, walking, running, laughing, crying, the leaves on the trees, the flowers in the field, whether white, red, or purple, it's birth, it is death. That is the way. We do not even have to use the word mind. Ordinary is the way. The famous Chinese sage Confucius said, "The way is at hand, but people are looking for it afar." Farmers are using it every day without being aware of it. We cannot be separated from the way, even for an instant. What we can be separated from is not the way.
Or that last one. It's a great punchline. But this is a classic question, isn't it? Like, okay, how do you practice? Well, you practice with what you got. Wait a minute, really? What do I do?
Because I thought it was interesting. I looked up relationships with Joshu, and Hansen was Joshu's teacher for about 40 years. And there's some debates about at what point in that relationship this engagement may have taken place. Some say Joshu may have been early in his training, like late teens, and some say he might have been late 50s. And so I thought that was an interesting piece, just sort of considering where it might have happened. Probably earlier, though, based on the fact that Muman's commentary says that he had to work with it for 30 years, and there was years that followed after this before Nansen died. And so I knew Flint gave me this koan for a reason. I don't know what the reason is, though. But, so I was trying to figure that out. But I really appreciated this seeking question that Joshu approaches Nansen with, which feels so fundamental to probably what brings all of us to this place, is sort of looking for some idea of what do we do, where do we go, with sort of wanting some sense of certainty or some sense of distinction of like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, this is the answer. That then is met with this initial response of, it essentially sort of says, simply being present. Ordinary mind is the way. Simply being present without adding anything to it is the way. Which I thought was obviously simplifying of things, but it's not necessarily reassuring or comforting, right? Sort of just being with the things that are in front of us. And I think Joshu's question back then also feels so human. So sort of like, so then what? So do I strive towards it then? Do I sort of put all my effort into this? Should I sort of pursue it ardently in a way that feels like, the way I was trained, particularly in my own upbringings, and you have to make yourself worthy, you have to do good.
Shouldn't I grasp for it? Like you were talking about?
Yeah. And in this sense, and I think John Tarrant's writing was a nice complement to this idea of if you turn toward it, you go against it. And what came to mind for me as I was reflecting on that line was to turn towards it would imply it is somewhere other than where we are, something other than who we are. So the idea is that the way is here, now, this moment, these circumstances, this being. And I think Joshu's response again feels very human. And if I don't turn toward it, then how do I know that I'm doing it right? Right? How do I know it's the way? How do
That's the conventional approach,
Yeah.
so what?
there should be some sort of feedback that tells me I'm doing it the right way. Which again, I thought this piece of the question implies that something is the way and other things are not. And I think Nansen feels like he's continuing to point him in the direction that everything is included. Nothing is left out. And that as we pay attention, that our tendency to want to pay attention to some things, not other things, and to sort of feel like we're paying attention to the right things and not the wrong things, trips us up, right? It actually obscures our ability to be present with what is actually here. Which I think is what nonsense begins to sort of then point to. It's not about some sense of certainty, it's about experience, about being present to the fullness of our experience in this moment, in this form that that moment is taking. I thought there's a really nice story that came to mind that I thought I would share from this book that probably is one of my favorite Zen titles, which is Novice to Master. That's not the favorite part. An ongoing lesson in the extent of my own stupidity. Which I thought was just lovely. The author is Soko Morinaga. So he tells a story. So he tells a story about sort of his movement coming into the monastery, training, and then eventually becoming the lead teacher or the abbot of the monastery. So he talks about how sort of he was very committed to cleaning. He was engaged in these activities that are sort of all about basic necessities and didn't see them as menial. So he sort of really took a lot of sort of satisfaction in engaging in these activities. And he says, if a person knows that they can come to some understanding of truth through the practice of cleaning, they just may get caught up in the practice and find that they are actually moving further away from seeing truth. Their own heart has become fettered by that practice. And tells the story, one morning after I had prepared the meal and given the call to breakfast, Suigan Roshi slowly entered the dining room and said, hey, go into my room and from my desk, look toward the alcove. He says, generally to the ears of a novice monk, the Zen master's manner of speaking comes across much like anger. So when I heard Roshi's words, I thought with a start, uh-oh, I bungled the cleaning again. And I immediately rushed to his room. His room was small. There was 4.5 tatami mat size. The distance between his desk and the alcove could not have measured 2 meters. But though I carefully inspected the area, I could not find even so much as a bit of dust or a drop of water left from the swab. I crawled about the room on all fours, but I could not find the problem anywhere. I planted myself there for a while and tried to think it out, but I hadn't a clue as to why Roshi was irritated with me. It couldn't be helped. I resigned myself to being yelled at again and returned to the dining room. I don't understand what I did wrong in the cleaning, I nervously admitted to Roshi. Please show me. You fool, he came back at me. Who said you did anything wrong in the cleaning? This morning I put that single rose of Sharon in the bud vase. It goes well with the scroll and looks so beautiful, so I told you to go take a look at it. You did see the flower, didn't you? It dawned on me that I had not, in fact, noticed the flower. I went back into Roshi's room to look. The wall of the alcove, which had been standing for over 250 years, was darkened. Against the smoky wall, there was a scroll with a single large calligraphy of the ideograph for dew. When the Zen monk writes the word dew, it is not to the natural phenomenon that he refers, but to direct revelation. Nothing concealed anywhere. Truth revealed in all things. Buddha revealed in all things. Dharma revealed in all things. If you all just let the scales drop from your eyes, you realize that everything everywhere is filled with truth. Everything everywhere is filled with Buddha. Everything everywhere is to be appreciated. this is what the scroll of dew was hanging there to say. Beneath the scroll, large, pure white blossoms seemed to float out from the old plastered wall and bathe the eye with its beauty. Just moments before I had failed to see the flower, my eyes had been tightly shut to it, and herein lies the difficulty of practice. My oversight was to become grist for my teacher's lectures. After I made this blunder, Zuigen Roshi was wont to say during his talks, if the heart is caught up, fettered, you cannot even see what you were looking right at. Why, just the other day, that idiot who's sitting over there.
Now you know why I gave it to you.
That's how I figured out. That's why Flint gave me this Koan. So I thought that really brought it to life this way that we can become so focused based on our assumptions that this is what we're supposed to be doing, or supposed to be looking at, that we miss the thing that's right in front of us, which I think is.
And quite specifically, when you're looking for, through the lens of what's wrong with you and what you got to fix, you miss the enlightenment that's already there.
Yeah.
The wakefulness that's
Yeah. So I think what it really helped me appreciate was why Zazen is the central practice for us, which is this practice of just sitting. And I heard somebody once say that it's just sitting without any additions, which I thought was such a nice way of framing it. But the practice is the embodiment of exactly what this koan's pointing towards, which is that sort of enlightenment isn't found in all of our striving and doing and knowing and the certainty that we try to sort of grasp onto, but it's through being with what's there, which can be internal but also external.
Yes, I just found a quote that the other day that just underscores what you're saying, so I just want to amplify your teaching. And it's another one from Peter Hershog, who has great one-liners, you know. He said, the path of enlightening all beings, John Master Matsu notes, is just ordinary mind. Of course, it is ordinary mind with a difference. The absence of any boundary or horizon on the other side of which lies something more or better, mystically complete. It's like, oh, it's ordinary, but it's a different kind of ordinary. There's nothing on the other side of it. It's like not.
Which I think Nansen points to in his response to Joshua when he talks about.
It's really good. That response is good. Let's go through it. What you were going to say?
Yes, he starts out saying the way does not belong to knowing or not knowing.
Because that's the only thing we think it is. You either know or you don't know. Like, what? If it's not that, what is it?
He says knowing in certainty, what John Tarrant was pointing towards, knowing is delusion. Not knowing is a blank consciousness. Which I think, when I think about that, and maybe you can offer something on it too, but sort of blank, like not knowing feels like sort of almost like not trying, not sort of endeavoring, sort of like, that's also not it.
Yeah, just kind of blowing it off.
Yeah.
Dissociating.
Giving up on trying to know it. Yeah.
They say, oh, if knowing is a problem, then okay, I'll just hang out. That's more freedom. Or sake.
And then he says, when you have really reached the true way beyond all doubts, you will find it as vast and boundless as the great empty firmament.
And then he just goes on like that wasn't a sentence that just stuck in your tracks. Oh, when you've really reached the true way beyond all doubt.
And I think at least what came to me as I continue to sort of wrestle with that statement, particularly that the way beyond all doubt, that you'll find it as vast and boundless as the great empty firmament, the sense that it's sort of beyond knowing, it's beyond sort of questioning, but also the sense of everything is included, that vast and boundless is the great empty firmament, or another translation I saw talks about space,
yes.
Sort of the sense that nothing is separate, it's all included. And so it's not that we sort of come to it and then we have it. I think when we try to cling to some idea or concept or even a moment, because of impermanence and change, we inevitably lose it.
How could it be talked about from a level of right or wrong, or good or bad, or small or large, or any duality?
So in some ways, so duality sort of falls away when we see things as they actually are, which is non-separate. And I think that sense that at these words, Joshi was enlightened, and as I was sort of thinking about that, there was a definition of enlightened as seeing the nature of things, seeing that everything is included, that it's all, like, there's no separation, there's no duality, there's no this and that, sort of right, wrong, included, not included.
There's a shift that was made, and this sort of awakening thing is a big shift in perspective, and it took him a while to let that open up. What on the commentary? What's this thing about nonsense base with shattered melted away? Trying to keep that. You did not just put.
I was curious what sort of nonsense base being shattered and melted away versus Joshu's base being shattered.
Yeah, because Nansen is the teacher, right? He was asked a question by Joshu. Anybody have anything on this?
Yeah. I think this came up the last time we talked about koans. And we said, it seems like the teachers are the ones getting destroyed. And you said something about, yes, because the teacher is carrying this lineage, these teachings forward, and really hoping that there will be other people to carry them as well. And that can be a heartbreaking experience to try to teach and pass this along.
That's one piece of it. I think that there's another piece too that I think of. What was his base?
I agree with that 100%. And also, a way to look at it is that the base being shattered and melted away is beneficial. It's the gripping side, all of the contents that a mind can get filled up with, but then in response to the student asking this heart-centered question of great importance, then the teacher's mind has the capacity to be shattered and
Join the
away.
student.
So it,
And join the student.
Yeah.
Said he could not justify himself. Now, I don't know about the translation on this. Because justify, you can have a lot of meanings. One of the ways I've read it, and I totally agree with all the things you're saying, is that nonsense base was his own awakening. And the student asked him, and he had to leave that place to meet his student. And there's no way he could explain what he had, his awakening. He had to invite his student, and he couldn't hold himself there because then he wouldn't have met his student as intimate. So his base was shattered and melted away. He met his student in this place where he couldn't explain anything about him. He had to, because the next thing was, even though Joshu had a realization, he developed Joshu. What happened to him?
I had something about that. So it's reminding me of a koan about a woman. I don't remember the beginning of it, but she had a bucket that she kept repairing.
That's tomorrow.
Oh,
I love it.
No, you're right on target.
Oh.
You're priming up.
I know, what are you gonna say?
So she kept repairing it with the, with pieces of wood around, and eventually the bottom fell out, and she was immediately.
Yeah.
So that's what I was
That's what we're setting up. Is that
Yeah,
what-
so if the teacher is experiencing with the student's alignment, their bottom has to fall out too. That's what I
And
was
one of
thinking.
the things about the so-called distinction between teacher-student is that if I'm taking on that role, part of my job is to not cling to the role or to cling to any place I might have that I have to keep relinquishing and letting go and letting go and letting go and letting go as the way of exemplifying the very thing we're talking about. And that doesn't mean I don't know anything. It doesn't mean I don't know anything. It means you step beyond. It's like the other Koan about how you step off a 100-foot pole. Suppose you reach the top. How do you take the one more step?
That's what was in it for me. All the things that y'all mentioned are also there because these are so rich, you know? But it was the flip of teacher-student because it's kind of a meaningless distinction at a certain point in practice. And also, I mean, I can learn from a dog and I do all the time, you know what I mean? Like there's not hierarchical teaching ultimately. So it's, I'm glad that Nansen was open to, you know, that offering.
One of the quotes that gets attributed to Joshua is he said, even with the 7-year-old child, if he's superior to me, I shall follow him and beg for his teaching. Even with a 100-year-old man, if he is inferior to me, I shall follow him and teach him. Sort of this idea is like
Yeah.
losing some
Like
of those
who's teaching
distinctions
who?
between the teacher, who's the student.
So the basis is knowledge.
Pardon?
I'm gonna say, so the base would be Nansen's knowledge. that
Or
he
any
shares.
position you take.
Right.
Any position you cling to will be eroded.
And I would say, you know, they use the words inferior, superior, but I would say, like, when I'm meeting something that feels like something I've either met before in meeting and I have a sense of it, or I might have a little way of meeting it with the person. There's that place in me that has to let go of knowing for them. Like I have to, am I willing to come into that space of discomfort to meet their suffering, whatever it is, if say they're inferior, whatever that means. Meeting someone else's ignorance or not knowing yet is exactly like meeting my own again. And so there's that level of human blood and guts and, you know, shame and whatever in me that's going to come up, I have to be willing to hold that space. And that takes me right off any teacher knowing place that I might think I have. And to me, that's part of the essence of being someone that would be able to really effectively hold space for someone else.
There's a wonderful little tray on the dresser in my bedroom, your house. And there are 2 words on it. The top word has a line through it. The top word is perfection. There's a line through it. Below that it says presence.
That's it. It strikes me that this is really about the dynamic of teaching and learning. And at any right, it's where, as you say, 2 beings come together, realize they're not separate, and there's something that happens between them that changes both.
If you allow it.
If you allow it.
As long as you melt away your base and don't justify yourself into the role.
Right. So the best teachers.
And painting.
And paint.
I mean, she's a painter, so it's, yeah.
Because when I teach painting, see that putting in others. See.
How did you have a good mentor in architecture before that? You may not have, I just.
Yeah, that's a long story. Sometimes.
But in any of these apprentice things where we're learning something,
Yeah, whatever. That exchange, that, yeah, it's a universal truth.
The thing, text.
Yeah, if we could all just keep trying to project a little bit, that would be.
oh, okay, volume wise. And also you had your hand up, Mike, we'll get back to you in a second.
The series of comments, I think you even said that you have to not know. In the Korean Zen tradition, that is the main thing that's emphasized, is not knowing.
Don't
So
know
it's
much.
a different way of understanding this story. In the Korean tradition, even if you attain enlightenment, what the hell is that? You can't know it, right? You have to keep not knowing, right? Otherwise you are clinging, right? So what everybody here is describing is this onward, rolling, openness now.
That's beautifully said. Do you remember in the Hidden Lamp, the chapter that Peg wrote on Choco? It was a story that she witnessed with Choco Beck, where a young man came and he'd never been there before, and was one of those people that was kind of trying to poke at her, the old lady. And so he said, "Are you enlightened?" And she said, "I hope never to have such a thought." That was the story, but that's it.
Well, I struggled with that line too about how Nelson's face was shattered and melted away, and I don't understand this. But the image that came to my mind is a teacher who was spending years teaching a student how to play Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto, and then this student just completely masters it, and then what happens to the teacher? It could be really depressing.
Or the teacher might sleep in ecstasy. It's interesting you bring that up. This is a side note, but on the airplane coming over, I had the long flight from Honolulu to Dallas. And so I watched a documentary called Crescendo. And it's the 2022 documentary of the, oh boy, an old brain. What? No, what can I think of this? At Fort Worth, piano competition. Clyburn. Sorry, I don't know why I could think of it. The Van Cliburn competition. And it shows these young people, and they talk about the teacher, and it shows them playing all these, I don't even know how people do what they do. And this young man who ultimately received the gold prize, whatever, but they were all just amazing. And these things came up of what it means to be with the teachers and what it means to be a student and how that it's really beautiful. Right. From one moment.
Well, and isn't it true that every expression of the life is going to be different? You can take the same piece of music and learn it technically and master that technically, but one person's expression will be different than the teacher's.
Yeah, they were talking about the fellow that they thought was brilliant who ended up being chosen. The piece he played is not a piece that had never played before. And also, one of the things they do in the competition, when they start the first round in the formal competition, after all, there's 30 people, and they commission a piece that's never been played before. And they give all of them that piece. And there's no recording for them to hear how it. No one's ever played it publicly or recorded it, and then they all play it. And they listen to them all. Isn't that an interesting one?
I love this analogy because really it's interpretation, right? How we interpret music and how we put our own spin on it, which is, I think, what we maybe want to be doing with these koans is what's your interpretation? What's your interpretation? And is there any right?
It's also what we do with the forms.
With the forms, okay.
Everybody bows.
Sure.
But Suzuki Roshi said when he first started teaching the young people in San Francisco back in the hippie days, he said, "You Americans love to do your own thing." He said, "So I can't tell you apart. But when I ask you all to do exactly the same thing, then I can see you." It's all, it narrows the way they do one thing, how they walk, how they sit, then I can see.
So I haven't heard the word humility yet. And what I imagine is that in a truly boundless space, if humility is present, what's a teacher versus a student who decides why would one be one and the other the other?
That's a beautiful thing. It's certainly part of it. It's part of the paradoxical nature of having confidence to bring yourself forth everything you got, and it being an expression of humility for the same person. But when I see that in a person, it's so touching. How are we doing? Work. Good. Work.
Yeah.
I have a question. How do you decide if you want to receive it or not?
Say it loud enough so they can hear you.
Yeah,
Back there.
I have a question, either for you, Ryan, to see what you made of this, or for anyone. But really intrigued, or pause and linger with it a little more with, if you try to turn toward it, you go against it. And what it's like, what's it like to hear that? You try to turn toward it and go against it.
So you said something about that.
Yeah.
You want more?
Yeah. Oh, a little juice in here, I think, of what's rumbling around for me. Like, if you try to turn toward it, you go against it, which can sound like, and maybe in a sense is, don't try to turn toward it because that would be wrong. That's not the right way. That's not correct. That's incorrect to try to turn toward it. And but he also says, like, but using words like right and wrong, don't touch it. How can you talk about it on the level of right and wrong? So is he meaning trying to turn toward it is?
That's when his face was shattered.
What
That
did you say?
turn. He had to go further.
He said that's when his face was shattered.
The student kept asking him, so he had to go further than just that. What he said wasn't incorrect, but it wasn't enough yet.
Yeah.
Just to comment further on that, so I found myself, and sometimes I do find myself in a lot of trainings, getting tripped up on all the words. And so I took this little piece and took my editor's pen out, and here's what I came up with. Josh, you earnestly asked Nansen, what? Nansen answered, what? Josh, you asked, should I? Nansen said, if you try, it won't work. Josh, you asked, if I don't try, how can I know? Nansen answered, know what?
This is what Koans are good for.
Right.
Exactly what you're doing. This is how you make them your own.
Yeah.
Start playing with them, open them up, let them start speaking to you, speak back to them. That's better than trying to figure them out.
Right.
Exactly.
And then you want to write like a hip hop song all of a sudden. Yeah. Like being Yoda or something. I think it's the try piece too. It's the efforting and the striving. Like as soon as you effort, and you're up to something, and then when you're up to something, then you're miss the mark a little bit, and that's okay. You just notice it and go, wee, that's what I do, and do it again.
It's so easy to slip into the try to know.
Right.
You have to try.
Yeah, that's right.
Or else you don't know
Exactly.
yourself as a trier.
And then you don't judge yourself for trying or not. You know what I mean? It's like it's just what the mind does. What's the thing in there? It said, if you try, you'll just trouble yourself. But actually, that's how you get all the information, just by trying. Yeah, and then you get to see all the stuff.
And
So
get
it's
trouble.
actually, that's how you learn.
And then move through the trouble.
It's all the trailheads right there. If you didn't try, you wouldn't know what the hell you're doing, you know? I mean, doing like what you're up to, you know? So it's like a funny thing. Yeah. I like your rhyme and skills.
And I think part of it is it's not, or this is another thought. It's not that Joshua didn't need to try, but nonsense says you try to turn toward it. There could be grasping in that. And I just remember a picture of my mother in her early 20s at the Louvre. In those days, you could get pretty close to Da Vinci's, oh gosh, who's the gal? Yeah, Mona Lisa.
One behind bulletproof grass and all.
Yeah. There was a velvet, you know, kind of like at the movies, there was a velvet. And Mom was standing there like this. She's not going toward it, she's beholding it. And there's such a difference between, I mean, I see it in my own life, grasping, you know, yeah, I'm gonna figure this out, or I want, you know, I want to know what that movie was about, or what is the name of that flower. Mom was just standing there. And I think in beholding, what comes, because it's a moment of zazen, where you're just beholding, you're not trying to nail anything down.
Bearing witness.
And you know, we've read it in accounts that through the years people come with their very fine measuring instruments, and they'll measure the tip of her nose to the ear and nose to ear and find out, you know, how did Da Vinci get all these proportions just beyond perfection. And boy, that doesn't seem like the most fun way to behold something.
That's the explaining part.
Yeah, right, yeah, lay it out flat.
We're close to the end of our time. You got more? We can use, what are we using?
I got two small things.
Please, I want to know what they are.
Well, when I was reading the verse, it kept reminding me of Mary Oliver, the reference of the seasons, and so I thought I would just invoke a Mary Oliver poem.
What are the patron saints of awakening together?
Yes. So familiar, especially the final lines, but The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass. The one who is eating sugar out of my hand. Who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. How to fall down into the grass. How to kneel down in the grass. How to be idle and blessed. How to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last end too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Yeah, I felt like it captured that when the presence of the season is here, it can be your happiest season.
Just beholding.
And I thought just one small story from Joshu, later as Joshu was in a teacher role. When a monk asked, when I wish to become a Buddha, what then? And Joshu, probably referencing this wisdom of this exchange, you have set yourself quite a task, haven't you? The monk said, when there's no effort, what then? Joshu said, then you are a Buddha already.
So why did I give this to Ryan? It's interesting because if you attempt to answer the question, you just get an opinion about something, but it's because it's not the right question. Does it suit him? This kind of question, this kind of, does it accord with who you know Ryan to be? You understand what I'm saying? So it's so foundational and it's beautiful, and it's so much that interaction that is both ordinary and profound. It has so much heart in it, and it talks about how someone makes sure that is willing to meet the person he's meeting so that they can get something instead of so they can make a good decision. And I see that humility and that encouragement from you all the time. That was a good group for you to wrestle with a little bit. Remember these ways that people are reflecting on Koans, and then I didn't think about this, but then in Jukai, you'll hear their Dharma names.
Could you speak up, Flint?
You'll hear their Dharma names then and see what you think about that. Another Koan.
It is time for a break, and but do we need to do anything before we take a break?
When we return, we'll be returning to inquiry.
Yes.
Is there anything we need or want to say about it now? Flint or Ryan?
No, let's take till 20 after. A little bit longer. Almost everybody here has been involved in this part of practice. I think most people, and if not, just follow along. In classical Zen practice, there are private meetings with the teacher Dokusan. It's a private meeting. And then there are Shosan ceremonies, usually at the end of a retreat, where it's a public meeting. That's a very crisp request and response from the teacher. And this is something in between, where it's a very intimate connection, but it's supported by everyone. And we have a little bit more time. So we'll set up over there closer to the screen to everybody.
Yeah, so please move your chairs back to approximately where they were, and then we'll reset.
Move again.
We'll move them again, but that way we can have a sense of where the.
Master, what do you mean by that?